Welcome back everyone to another 100 days of hardcore Minecraft. It's been a while. My original plan was to release this video a few weeks ago, but moving houses is a real pain. Between multiple delays, lots of unpacking, and a lack of Wi-Fi, I was not able to spend much time making content. Luckily, things eventually calmed down, and I finally got to sit down and spend some time on the YouTube grind. Before we get into the video, I would like to say that only 5% of the people watching my videos are actually subscribed, so if you do go on to enjoy the video, consider subscribing. It's completely free, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't enjoy the video. If this video gets 10,000 likes, I will survive 500 days. Trust me, this 100 days has some pretty wild stuff in it, so without further ado, let's get straight into how I survived 400 days of hardcore Minecraft. It's been quite a long time since I last logged onto this world, so the first thing that I did was say hello to the villagers, iron golems, and my pets who were still chilling in the library. The first thing on my to-do list for these 100 days was to increase the number of magma blocks in the creeper farm killing chamber. Once that was done, I used my levels to rename my tools. Thank you to Dr. Vader for leaving a comment on my 200 days video with some of the names that I used here. To finish off the day, I gathered materials for a super smelter as I was fed up with using the small 4 furnace array that I had made previously. Day 302 was spent building the super smelter. Instead of using a tutorial to make the smelter, I decided to try and make my own design. I did, however, take a lot of inspiration from designs I built in other worlds. On my second day of working on the smelter, a wandering trader appeared. For once, they were actually trading something useful, and after spending a few emeralds, small drip leaf was mine. The super smelter was completed on day 304. Overall, I was really happy with how it turned out, and even happier with the fact that I wouldn't have to use the old smelter anymore. I still needed fuel to run the actual thing, but that's a problem for the future. The original furnaces had been steadily smelting glass for the past few days, which I collected to work on the glass roof above the village. I placed over 2,000 pieces of glass on this day alone for the roof, and it barely seemed to make a difference. This was going to be a big project. My stone supplies were running a bit low, so I spent the day mining in the quarry. While digging, I discovered a ravine that contained a mine shaft, which was, ironically, the first that I had found in this world. After depositing the resources from the quarry mining, I headed to the mine shaft to kill a cave spider. It didn't take too long to find a cave spider spawner, and once the nearby cave spider was dispatched of, I finally completed the Monsters Hunted achievement. Before leaving the mine shaft, I mined a bunch of coal to refill my fuel supplies. Exploring the mine shaft had gotten me into the mood for an adventure, so I grabbed my fireworks and went looking for an amethyst geode. Just as day 308 was beginning, I spotted my first geode. Using my fortune pickaxe, I harvested the fully grown crystals and then mined some of the calcite surrounding the geode. Calcite was going to be very useful for future village detailing. There was a village right next to the geode which had 2 blacksmith buildings. Unfortunately, neither of the chests had anything good in them, but I did manage to get a bunch of hay bales, which are always useful. My next goal was to find some deep slate and tuff, which can only be found deep underground. It didn't take long to find a cave that led straight to lava level. While exploring, I came across my first axolotl, which I captured in a bucket. If you have any name suggestions for this axolotl, leave a comment with #axolotl and your name suggestions, and I will pick a name in the next 100 days. One of my goals in this series is to get every type of deep slate ore, as some of the ores will not be attainable in survival when the 1.18 update arrives. The majority of day 309 was spent collecting deep slate and tuff. Once that was done, I did a little bit of exploring and found a mine shaft, diamonds, and a ruined portal that had a bunch of glistering melons. With my adventuring urges satisfied, I returned home and went to sleep. The next 2 days were spent improving the Iron Golem Memorial. Previously, the centerpiece of the memorial was just 4 blocks of iron and a pumpkin. It was time for an upgrade. I decided to build a giant stone iron golem head that would rest in the middle of the field. To make the statue more interesting, I rotated it 45 degrees horizontally and vertically. By the end of day 311, the basic shape for the statue was complete. Now it was time for the texturing. One of the blocks that I wanted to use for the texturing was the new moss, which can only be found in shipwrecks and from wandering traders. Luckily, shipwrecks are pretty common, and with my elytra, I quickly found one with moss in it. The shipwreck also contained a buried treasure map, which I used to obtain another Heart of the Sea. After returning home, I placed the buried treasure map in the cartography building, and then spent the rest of the day farming moss for the statue. Using a mixture of moss, tuff, and stone variants, I spent the next 3 days creating a block gradient to texture the build. Once the statue was finished, I spent some time blending the bottom into the surrounding area to make it look more natural. Overall, I think that the statue turned out really good and is a definite improvement from the previous statue. And who knows, maybe one day we'll even make a body for the golem as well. Day 316 was spent planting roses that had been collected from the iron farm while I was working on the build. If you have any ideas for ways to make the memorial even better, make sure to leave a comment down below. On day 317, I pivoted from placing poppies to placing glass for the glass roof above the village. Get used to this site because it's going to become pretty common for the next 40 days. Right now, my only fuel source for the super smelter was coal, and I didn't have much left. To fix this issue, I decided to gather materials for a bamboo farm which I would build soon. The sugarcane farm has been running for a while now, and when I checked the chest, I was not disappointed. With that done, I started clearing out an area for the bamboo farm. I had learned from the sugarcane farm and chose to build the bamboo farm closer to the village so it would be loaded more often. The rest of the day was spent repairing my gear at the Enderman grinder. This bamboo farm design is by Shulkercraft. The tutorial will be in the description. It works by having a flying machine that will harvest the bamboo periodically and then be collected by a bunch of hopper minecarts below the floor. While working on the farm, a wandering trader appeared and tried to scam me. Let's just say that he is not selling anything anymore. In order for the water streams to work properly, all of the bamboo had to be grown. Instead of waiting for it all to grow, I simply placed another piece on top, which gave the same results. When I tested the finished farm for the first time, I was not prepared for the amount of lag it would produce. If I even tried to look at the flying machine in first-person view while it was harvesting, my game immediately dropped to 1 to 5 frames per second. Funny enough, if I viewed the same flying machine in third-person view, I was completely fine. Minecraft, am I right? With the farm complete, I spent the rest of the day mining ice for the next step of my plan. Although I could have transported the bamboo from the farm to the super smelter manually, I wanted to automate the process more. My plan was to create a water tunnel that would transport the items straight from the farm to the fuel collection area of the smelter. These tunnels are super easy to make, and other than a small bit of redstone needed to dispense the items into the water, things went fairly smoothly. I say fairly because my redstone skills are next to none, and it took me at least a day to figure out how to fit the observer clock under the collection system. To kickstart the fueling process, I manually filled the furnaces with the bamboo that had built up while making the water tunnels. Once that was done, I added a small collection system for the bamboo to go into after filling the smelter. Day 329 was spent emptying the shulker boxes from my ender chest into the storage system. It's not super interesting, but it will definitely be worth it in the long term. My food supplies were running a bit low, so I took a few emeralds and bought some pork chops from the butcher. These would be needed for my next adventure, wither skeleton hunting. During the next 2 days, I killed wither skeleton after wither skeleton after wither skeleton. I needed 9 skulls for what I had planned, so the hunting took much longer than usual, but with my Smite 5 sword, I was able to maximize my wither skeleton killing speed. Hunting in a Soul Sand Valley nether fortress was also super good because fortress mobs have a much higher spawning rate in them. After returning home and depositing the mob drops, I immediately traveled to the end and started mining obsidian. That's right, I spent a whole hour just mining obsidian, and let me tell you, it was painful. The obsidian mined just slowly enough for it to be tedious, and having to listen to the constant enderman noises was just the cherry on top. But the pain was worth it as I was able to collect almost 20 stacks from the one pillar that I was mining. Days 335 and 336 were spent placing glass for the roof above the village. Progress was slow, but bit by bit, the roof was getting built. I think now would be a good time to mention that I made a huge mistake while making this roof, which will become very apparent later in the video. With the crop field already outside the village, I decided to move the animal pens as well. This would also clear out more space for future buildings. Rebuilding the pens was super easy as they were basically just a bunch of fences, wood, and carpet. Moving the animals also went surprisingly well, though a few strays did escape. Overall, I'd call this a big success. To start the day, I checked the super smelter. To put the rates of the bamboo farm into perspective, All of the furnaces and hoppers were already completely filled. The bamboo farm is pretty much just the opposite of the sugarcane farm. With the super smelter checked on, I spent the next 2 days making the paths for the next village expansion. After finishing the paths, I visited the Enderman grinder and repaired my tools. I also took the time to enchant some extra shovels, which I used to collect more sand for the roofs above the village. My one netherite shovel ended up being enough for the whole mining trip, but at least I have some extras now. It was finally time to give the super smelter its first test. I added 2 shulkers of sand into the input chest and waited. Before long, the first pieces of glass started flowing into the output chest. When I went to check on how the actual smelter was working, one of the furnaces was not smelting, however. Luckily, it was a simple fix of moving some of the redstone around, and just like that, I had a fully working, very efficient super smelter. While looking through some of the comments on one of my previous 100 days videos, someone suggested that I make some residential homes for the villagers. Evidently, I thought this was a pretty good idea, as I spent the next 5 days working on the first 2 houses of the new residential district. My goal was to make every house unique, with the same block palette, so they took longer to build compared to if I built them all the same. However, before I could finish the residential district, I had something that I needed to do. Remember the wither skulls and obsidian that I collected earlier in the video? Well, it's time to finally use them. After gathering all of the things that I would need for this fight, I grabbed my elytra and flew to a flat area far away from the base. There's no way I'm doing this near Snowville. To start my preparations, I dug down to the bottom of the world and set up a resistance and regeneration beacon. Around the beacon beam, I built a square of obsidian that would be the stage for the battle. Now that my preparations were completed, I organized my inventory and then slept, bringing us to day 350. Right as I was about to summon the withers, I realized that I didn't have any soul sand. Luckily, I had some in my storage system, but having to fly all the way back to my base just for soul sand is slightly inconvenient. Before we get into the triple wither fight, I thought I would explain why I'm redoing this, as I already technically did fight 3 withers in 300 days. In the first battle, I forgot to aggro all of the withers at the same time, which basically meant that I was taking on 1 wither 3 times in a row, instead of 3 all at the same time. Hopefully that clears things up. Getting back to the fight, I was super nervous for this one. Even with the beacon, this was going to be significantly more difficult than the previous triple wither fight. Realizing that I wanted to do this before night came, I summoned the 3 bosses and then began the battle. Or I would have started the battle, but every single wither immediately flew away and started attacking the bunnies in the nearby area. In order to re-aggro the withers, I had to shoot each wither from fairly close range and then run/curl back to the obsidian square. Doing this unfortunately took me out of the range of the beacon, and I had to constantly run away to avoid taking large amounts of damage. After a large struggle and lots of wasted time, I finally lured the 3 bosses back to the square and the fight began in earnest. Instead of me talking over this next part, let's mix things up and do a montage. Cue the battle music. With the 3 nether stars in front of me, I finally felt satisfied. Ever since that first triple wither fight, I had felt a sense of frustration that I hadn't fully taken on 3 withers at the same time, and doing this finally removed that feeling. To start day 351, I set up a quintuple beacon under the fountain, which would give me every beacon effect at the same time. Once that was done, I removed the old beacon. While doing this, I actually discovered that the core of the beacon was made of emerald blocks from the original 100 days beacon. Pretty cool. On day 352, it started snowing. I was super excited to see if the glass roof was working, but that was until the snow started falling directly on top of the glass. Because I had not built the roof at build height, snow could still land on it, which meant that my village was going to become very dark very soon. For the rest of these 2 days, I worked on placing glass for the roof while brainstorming ideas on how to deal with the snow. By the time I had finished placing the glass, the rest of the sand had smelted, so I added some more. All of the smelting had depleted the fuel supply of the furnaces, but luckily there was still a bunch stored up in the overflow chests, which I used to refill the system. However, it seemed like there wasn't any new bamboo coming into the system, so I went to check on the bamboo farm. It's a good thing that I did, as I had made some serious design mistakes when designing the item dispenser for the bamboo, and all of the drops were getting clogged in the system. I ended up spending the whole day repairing the system, and I still wasn't done by the end of it. A good portion of day 355 was also spent fixing the bamboo farm. It was quite painful doing so, as all of the redstone was in a very small space, and I had to constantly crawl and ender pearl just to move a few blocks. Once that was done, I repaired my tools at the enderman grinder. Some more glass had cooked up while I was working on the bamboo farm. I loaded it up into my inventory and then flew up to the roof. The last pieces of glass were quickly placed down, and with that, the roof was finally complete. This project was started all the way back in 200 days, and finally completing it honestly just felt awesome. I had also thought of a way to fix the snow problem while working on the roof. My plan was to simply place torches over the whole thing. It was the best solution that I could think of, so I grabbed my coal and crafted as many torches as I could. Then it was just a matter of covering the roof in them. Is anyone getting original 100 days torch placing vibes? Because I sure am. Not sure that's a good thing though. The small amount of coal that I had left was not enough to completely light up the glass roof, so I grabbed my pickaxe and went on a small mining trip. After finding a good cave, I started mining as much coal as I could. While doing this, I got jump scared by a zombie, which appeared out of absolutely nowhere. I also found my first deep slate lapis and some deep slate diamonds by using the placement of the lapis ore. The first part of the day was spent fortuning all of the coal ore. Once that was done, I crafted some torches and then got back to lighting up the roof. When the last torch was placed, I flew up and examined my hard work. I was quite happy to find that the torches only loaded in when I was close to them, which would reduce lag and make the roof look a lot cleaner. I'd say that this was a project well done. Now that the 3 withers have been killed and the roof is completed, it's time to get back to the residential area of the village. My plan was to make 6 houses in total, so I had a lot of work to do. Luckily, I wasn't trying to build any mansions, so I was able to finish each house in 1 to 3 days, which isn't too bad. Like all of the previous builds in this series, I was using a block palette of spruce, dark oak, and stone, which are all materials that can be gathered in bulk fairly easily. One of my goals while building was to give each house at least one unique feature that would differentiate it from the rest. Something as simple as a balcony, different roof design, or cool window can really make a build look way better. The building process was nice and chill, and before long, 6 brand new buildings had been added to the village. None of these builds were perfect by any means, but when they're all together, they improved the village quite a lot. To start day 370, I visited the iron farm and cleared the storage system. It had been quite a while since I last checked on the farm, and let's just say that there was a lot of iron. There was also a ridiculous amount of poppies in the system. To put how many there were into perspective, each iron golem only drops 1 or 2 poppies each. This was the first time that I had used an auto clicker to plant the poppies, and to be honest, I'm not sure why I didn't do so earlier. Not having to click constantly was super nice, and my placing speed was just a lot faster. Before going to bed on day 372, I spent some time making a super good crossbow to use for some advancement hunting. The first 2 advancements I collected were for shooting and killing a pillager with my shiny new crossbow. Then I flew over to the ocean and practiced my tactical fishing skills. After that, it was off to the ocean where I spotted a few ocelots in the trees and used my spyglass to locate some parrots. Using my fortune hoe, I collected some seeds and then tamed 2 of the colorful birds. You know what that means. It's name suggestions time. Leave a comment down below with #parrot and I will pick 2 names in the next 100 days. Following up on the It's a Bird advancement, I headed to the nether and used my spyglass on a nearby ghast. Once that was done, I tried to do a really cool dream style shredder clutch. And let's just not talk about that. Anyways, I gave the strider a little snack and then zoomed off into the red nether sunset. The next day I crafted a respawn beacon and then set my spawn in the nether. While there, I also gave a gold ingot to a piglin and then took it back. Using a netherite ingot and some chiseled stone bricks, I made a lodestone. I decided to place it above the wooden gate of the castle to show off my wealth. To finish my advancement hunting spree, I took a compass and clicked the lodestone to get the country load, take me home advancement. Doing all of these achievements had drained me of the last of my firework supplies, so I had to go AFK at the creeper farm. However, because I didn't have any rockets to fly up to the AFK chamber, I needed to use my Riptide Trident and a bunch of ender pearls to launch myself up. Once up there, I spent the rest of the day and day 375 farming gunpowder. After collecting the gunpowder and crafting a ton of rockets, I went on an adventure. The goal of this trip was to find 3 different Badlands biomes, which would give me the adventuring time advancement. The first thing that I found on my adventure was a herd of goats chilling on a mountain. I said hello to them and then continued on. The next day I found 2 beehives which I harvested to get the total bee location achievement. I also came across a pair of desert temples which I looted and then blew up when they didn't have any good loot. On day 378 I found an ice spikes biome, which I honestly think is one of the coolest biomes in Minecraft currently. Like, seriously, this biome is awesome. Right as my elytra was about to break, I finally arrived at my first Badlands biome. In my excitement about finding the biome, I forgot about the durability of my wings and almost died falling from the sky. Unfortunately, this specific Badlands did not contain an eroded Badlands biome, which meant that I was not able to complete the adventuring time challenge. I did, however, take the opportunity to set up a haste 2 beacon and do a bit of terracotta mining for future builds. After collecting the 2 shulkers of terracotta, I made a nether portal and took advantage of the 8 times faster travel to return home. There was still time left in the day, so I visited the coral reef and harvested a bunch to use for path building. With the glass roof in place, I could finally clear the snow in the village permanently. I definitely plan on adding some back in the future, but for now, all grass is better than grass and random patches of snow. Once the village was cleared, I set my spawn at the respawn anchor and then traveled to the end for some obsidian mining. I also spent a little while at the enderman grinder to top off the durability of my tools. When I jumped into the end portal, I was teleported straight to the respawn anchor instead of the world spawn, which was super convenient. This is proof that you can use them even in hardcore mode. One of the harder advancements that I still needed to get was the Uneasy Alliance, where you have to bring a ghast to the overworld and kill it. My idea was to make a giant nether portal in a soul sand valley and then use a fishing rod to pull the ghast into it. Making the nether portal was easy, getting an actual ghast to come through was a completely different story. There were multiple instances where I was super close to completing the challenge, but the ghast ended up blowing itself up with its own fireball. I actually did manage to bring a ghast through at one point, but it disappeared when I went through the portal. Even now, I'm still confused about what happened. But finally, after almost an hour of struggle, I successfully dragged a ghast to the overworld and killed it. I know that there are ways to complete this challenge by creating a machine that will transport the ghast to the overworld, but to be honest, that doesn't really feel like a legit completion to me. Despite the fact that I had found my first axolotl in the opening 10 days of the challenge, I had yet to find another or do anything with the original. Luckily, I had plans to achieve both of these goals. The first of these goals led me down into a nearby cave, where I almost died to a creeper. After settling my heart down, I continued on my adventure and quickly found an axolotl. However, it seemed that the creeper's other buddies had showed up and wanted to stop me. Using some quick thinking, I scooped up the axolotl and then made a hasty retreat. The rest of the day was spent experimenting with using moss instead of grass as the main floor block for the village. I wasn't sure which I liked more, so if you have a favorite, make sure to leave a comment down below telling me which one you like. With the 2 axolotls collected, it was time for the second phase of my plan, an aquarium built into the floor of the storage room. In the previous 100 days, the storage room had been finished, but not fully decorated. Throughout this video, I had been debating if I should add a table to the center or some sort of fancy floor design, but after seeing the axolotls swimming around, I knew that an aquarium would be a lot cooler. It also gave me the opportunity to try out a building theme that I didn't get to use very often. One of my favorite parts of making this build was being in the storage room and having all of my materials so close. I even went the extra mile and converted the whole tank to water source blocks instead of just filling the top layer and then letting it flow down. Overall, I think that this build turned out super well and definitely adds a lot of detail and personality to the storage room. Day 394 was spent replacing the torches in the storage room with a variety of hidden lights that made the room look a lot cooler and more finished. There was still one more build that I wanted to make in these 100 days. To start off, I removed an old village house by the blacksmith. Then it was time for me to begin building the first, and probably last, bee house of the world. The amount of glass that I used for this build definitely made it stand out, but by incorporating the usual spruce and dark oak wood as well, I was able to make it look like it belonged at least a little bit. However, I think where this build really shines is on the inside. I tried to make it as nature-filled as I could and used a mixture of flowers as well as some azalea leaves, which I gathered by bone mealing some azalea bushes. Hopefully, the bees will like their new home. On the penultimate day of the challenge, I brewed potions for my final advancement of the video, Furious Cocktail. I already had a good number of the potions, and with the added beacon effects, preparing wasn't too difficult. As the sun rose on day 400, I gathered my potions and began drinking. One by one, the effects were added, some positive and others negative. When the final potion was downed, I heard the familiar challenge completion music chime in the background. That's one step closer to fully completing Minecraft. Well, at least the achievements. With that out of the way, I spent some time enjoying what I had built in this video. Once that was done, I gathered my pets and traveled to the top of the castle. From there, I created a small bench that faced towards the village. My group of companions had grown once again, and together we used the last moments of the day to gaze out over what we had managed to complete. While a part of me was satisfied with the progress I had made, a different, much larger part was already thinking about what the future had in store. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing, but other than that, this has been GlitchNOut. Goodbye everyone!